Yo, what's up? What's going on? What's good, everybody? That's right, the Boxing Source checking in here once again here on December 2nd, 2024. Yes, this has been a very busy day here when it comes to the sport of boxing. At least here, through the Boxing Source, I was able to, have an earlier interview there with one heavyweight contender with Artur. But now you'll have a great guest here that's joining me here as we're having some preparations that's going to be coming up here real soon. But glad to have him on here. Spoke with him at one time before, but he is of course former world title contender in the super middleweight and light heavyweight division. Says his career spanned from 1988 to 2001, and he is a well-respected trainer in the sport. Of course, he is hailing from the great city of Hartford, Connecticut. That is Iceman John Scully. What's going on?
How you doing?
All good, man. All good. I mean, it's been a crazy weekend. Topped off with like a crazy day. We just had an announcement that happened about a couple of hours ago that I was about to inquire about, with you here in reference to Artur Beterbiev. Of course, you're like the chief secretary for Artur Beterbiev, and it was just recently announced that he will be in the rematch there with Dmitrii for those light heavyweight titles there. And, we're just, it's not been that far long since we done had the first fight, where
Right.
Beterbiev was able to become the undisputed champion there. So what's your reaction to that, recent news of this rematch going down?
Well, let me just clarify. Like Marc Ramsay is actually the chief second, and
Okay.
I'm assistant trainer. Just
Okay.
so I make sure we got that right.
All right.
But you know what? I was actually surprised that the fight is happening so soon, and I'm happily surprised because this type of thing doesn't happen anymore in boxing.
Yeah.
It should happen. It used to happen. You remember Sugar Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran, they fought two of the biggest fights ever 6 months apart. July, I think it was July, August, 5 months apart. And they very rarely do that anymore. But so I'm very pleased that the fight is happening soon. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you just had that first fight, and at least for me in that first fight, we talked about the what Beterbiev-Bivol was doing there in the first half of that particular fight, and how Beterbiev was able to make the proper adjustments and eventually catch up to him. And I think it was around the 8th round or something like that, where like the fight changed, where Bivol looked like he had something where he felt like he stunned Beterbiev, and then when he saw something happen with Beterbiev have like a little pause, then he just went for the gusto as far as like trying to see if he could get a knockdown or a stoppage. But then it ended up having the fight turn into Beterbiev's favor, and that's what you had in reference to the decision being in favor of Artur Beterbiev, him getting those championship rounds and a number of the close rounds there. So it was a great tactical fight between those two fighters there, in the for the top part of the light heavyweight division.
Right. Yeah, for sure. It was high level. It's a high level professional boxing match, and that's what the people paid for. That's what they got. I expect nothing less in the rematch.
Yeah. Now going into the fight, or at least some time before that first fight, because we all know that it was originally scheduled for June 1st,
right.
And had the injury that was suffered by Artur Beterbiev. So the weeks leading into when the fight was announced, that first fight was announced, and then weeks leading into it, I felt like not very many people knew about the status or the condition there of Artur Beterbiev coming off that injury. I think it was with the meniscus. And at least for me, I was like, is he, fully ready to go and everything like that? It didn't take until like the week of the fight, and then when they had the workouts, and then I saw him, doing his general workouts and stuff like that, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, he's definitely ready, for this fight.
Right.
Like how was it like in camp, with him going through the recovery process and then starting the preparation for Dmitrii-Bivol for that first fight?
Well, what Artur did was, and he usually does this, but he did it especially for this fight. He went by himself to Siberia. It was like stuff out of like a Rocky movie. And he went to Siberia, and it's kind of funny. He was riding his bike up those huge mountains they have over there. He basically rehabbed himself. He trained himself back into shape. And so by the time he got to training camp with us, he had already been through the torture of riding his bike up those mountains over there. So he was ready to go already. And to be honest, during the training camp, I never even thought about his knee. It never crossed my mind because he didn't show, any fatigue, pain or anything. And then I did an interview right before the fight, and somebody asked me about it. And I was like, man, it's kind of crazy, but I forgot all about it till you mentioned it. And that's the same thing, with you asking me now. I had actually forgot about it because it didn't seem like it was a factor.
Gotcha. I mean, at least on my end, I felt like it was a concern because the history there with Beterbiev, and of course him being 39 years old, currently that having those injuries that would affect you in bouts if you don't fully recover in them. But with you saying what his training regimen was or his recovery regimen, I'm like, yeah, he definitely was able to get himself back in there. You go to Siberia and you riding on a bike in Siberia, like, yeah, that'll definitely get your legs back for sure.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, he's a different mentality. You don't have to worry about him, like slipping and not doing what he's supposed to do. That's not even an issue ever. So I honestly, I wasn't at all worried about him recovering or anything. It never even crossed my mind, to be honest with you.
Gotcha. Yeah, not I was saying there with that fight, as I mentioned there, when we were talking with our guy Joseph Herron of War Week Boxing, I said, Dmitrii-Bivol in those first few rounds looked like he was trying to establish himself with the jab in the front foot, but also try to follow with the jab with his power hand, and try to like show like, okay, not I could only box, but I could also stand and get in the trenches, so to speak. I felt like that was something that he wanted to establish either for himself or try to send a message out to Beterbiev there in those first few rounds. But then after that, you see like rounds 4 and 6, he started to move around, laterally a little bit, started to be around the ropes. And, Beterbiev was just catching up with him, landing shots when he could within range. And then it just got to that point there in the 8th round where, Bivol just felt like, hey, maybe I got him this time. Maybe I got him. And it ended up being on the bad side there for him in that particular instance.
Well, I thought he was in the beginning, he was boxing pretty well, but I never go by the beginning of Artur's fights because he's going to get stronger and sharper and faster and get his rhythm. His 5th round is always better than his first. Once he got going, I thought Bivol was boxing well, but then it reached a point where I think Bivol decided, I want to win, but I'm not really willing to go through a whole lot of this to actually win. I don't think he wanted to take it as far as he would have had to take it. I think he felt the power, and he erred on the side of caution. Look, I don't blame him. I mean, you're in that ring. It's easy to talk before a fight or after a fight, but when you're in there feeling that kind of almost inhuman power, it just survival is a natural reaction for sure.
Yeah, most definitely. You're going in there at that time against a man that had 20 wins by way of knockout. And I think going into that first round, particularly in that last minute or so in the first round, you seen a good amount of trading between, those two fighters. And I think like after that was when you kind of seen Bivol say, you know what, let me try to scale it back a little bit and try to
Yeah.
see if I can keep within range there in those first few rounds. But like I was saying there in the fourth, at least the fourth through the sixth, when I was watching it, I was like seeing Bivol move around a lot. And I saw Beterbiev score to the body, a few times. I was like, because I was picking Beterbiev, and I see like Bivol moving to Beterbiev's right. I'm like, throw the right hook, like stop him from moving, throw the right hook. But he was still able to get to Dmitrii Bivol there in the latter half of the fight.
Right. Yeah, that was, it was kind of predictable. Like if you, excuse me, if you know boxing with any two guys at that level with those type of styles, it's going to favor the guy who's really strong and aggressive and a big puncher. He's going to end up, like in other words, if the fight went 30 rounds, if they scheduled it for 30 rounds, obviously there's no way Bivol survives. Like he can't hold him off for that long. So it's kind of like, all right, can he hold him off and outbox him enough over 12 rounds? And it was close. It was competitive. I think we won the parts of the fight that counted. In a real fight, if you're gonna, and if like it's like the rounds mean the same. Like if you win the first round, it counts exactly the same as if you win the last round. But it's a different feeling. It's a different vibe. It's a different impression. Winning the first round doesn't mean anything in terms of like you could watch a million fights and no matter who wins the first round, it doesn't mean you can tell who's going to win the fight based on that because there's too long to go.
Right.
It's an indicative thing when you're getting the 10th, 11th. The guy who wins those rounds, that's a little bit different. That's a little more impressive. So I think that's what the difference between the two of them was.
Yeah, like when you get to that middle point of the fight, you pretty much have a good gauge of who's gonna have the advantage going into those last rounds if it gets to those last rounds. And I feel like Beterbiev, as you said, was making the proper adjustments there and was able to get to Bivol there. And once he did that, and you seen Bivol's movement start to get less and less, that's when you seen Beterbiev get the work in. After what happened in the 8th round, you almost seen like a near stoppage around that 9th and 10th because you seen Beterbiev get to Bivol a lot more and start to make a lot of those punches count. So, and that's part of like how he was 20-0, 20 KOs up to that particular point.
Right. Well, there was, I don't remember exactly when the first one, but there was 2 instances in the fight. I'm going to guess the first one was like the 8th or the 9th round, and the last one was in the 12th round. There were 2 instances when it occurred to me, I thought we had him. I thought Artur was going to stop him. I forget if I'd have to watch it again, but the 8th or 9th, the vibe was he's got him. Like he's not gonna make it to the end of the round. And then in the 12th round, there came a moment about halfway through when I thought, okay, Bivol's not going to make it. Arthur's really going to turn it on. But he sucked it up and he did what he had to do. But it was. I'm just like I say, I'm just really happy that they're fighting again.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, you have 2 guys there at the top level. They're in the light heavyweight division, and for some, they have them both in the pound for pound rankings. There, I got at least Beterbiev in my pound for pound rankings there for the boxing source. But to have those like 2 highly skilled fighters be able to get in the ring there, and like you said, with that quick turnaround, that's like about 4 months, between fights. Yeah, you rarely see that here, especially a fight of that magnitude that has the undisputed light heavyweight championships on the line. Like you really see that there. So having that happen. Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, February 22nd. Definitely looking forward to that. So I'm gonna see if I could go backwards here. When it comes to your work as your trainer or assistant trainer and things like that. You've worked with fighters in the past such as Lawrence Clay Bay, Francisco Palacios, George Foreman III, Scott Pemberton, and also with world champions like Jose Antonio Rivera, Bad Chad Dawson, and of course I mentioned there with Beterbiev. When you look back at your career as a trainer so far, what stands out to you from this particular point?
I think one thing, when Jose Rivera beat Tara Garcia for the WBA junior middleweight title, the thing was, I had known Jose for a long time. We had been on a vacation together. We hung out. Amazingly, I used to spar with him for a lot of his fights. I would drive up to Worcester. It's like a 45-minute drive. And I used to spar with him all the time for his fights. And then I got the opportunity to train him. And I knew the type of kid he was and the type of work he put in since he was a kid. Like I could tell you stories about him from 10 years before he won that title, and just amazing work ethic and discipline. And so helping him win that title was special because I knew what he put in. I knew the type of guy he was and what he put in to get it. When Chad beat Hopkins, that was big because I had my moments as a trainer in that fight. Like a fighter does his thing, but a trainer has moments. It's like when I'll give an example, like when Angelo Dundee told Sugar Ray Leonard in the Hearns fight, you're blowing it, son.
You're blowing it, son.
That had nothing to do with Ray. That was Angelo's moment, and I kind of felt like I had a couple moments there when, as a trainer, I had my moment that I remember. So I was really happy because sometimes you could train a guy, and I'll be honest, you could train a guy for 6 weeks and you go to the fight and he wins the fight. But in reality, other than getting him ready, like, you didn't really play a role. Like the guy won the fight, nothing major happened, and you didn't have an input. You didn't need to. He didn't need your expertise. But in that fight, there was moments when Chad needed me to be who I am, and I stepped up, and we won. We won that one together. So I was happy. That's a highlight for me. And then there was a fight. Lawrence Clay Bay, the last fight of his career against Derek Bryant. It was on ESPN, and that was so amazing. Something happened in that fight. I'm actually going to write about it. I'm writing a book. Hopefully I finish it in my lifetime, but I write about it. And it was such a dramatic moment that I have a voicemail that I saved from Joe Tessitore on ESPN. He called me the next morning. And he said, John, we could hear you on the headsets. We could hear you in between rounds. He said, that was the most amazing moment in ESPN history in my time being here. He said, if you never do anything again in your career, you can be proud of what you did last night. And it was a special thing. Just something big happened. And it's just crazy moment. And so I remember those three in particular stand out to me.
Gotcha. Now, like you said there, as a trainer, it's one thing to have your fighter prepared for a fight, but like you brought up, like, if you have a fighter and or like they say, they're favored significantly over another fighter. So it's like, that once they step in the ring that, they're going to handle business and there's something there. But
right.
if
you didn't have to help them. Yeah. Like there comes, you're there as a trainer. Like Angelo Dundee, he was with Ray for a few fights and, nothing dramatic happened. They won the fights. He beat Larry Bonds and he beat different guys and Bruce Finch, and nothing happened, so he got paid, but he probably didn't feel like anything significant happened. But when the moment came against Hearns the first time, against Hagler before the 11th round, When he
Yeah.
says 6 minutes, uh, you know, he stepped up when he was needed. He stepped up, and the opportunity arose for him to show himself, just like the opportunity arises for a fighter. And so I was, I'm happy. I'm very satisfied that I've been able to do that a few times in my career.
Yeah, and you talk about those moments there that you had, like you said with Lawrence Clay Bay, with Chad Dawson, there with Jose Rivera and that type of thing. Those are like the moments that stand out, for trainers that they're working with fighters. You talk about the moment there with Chad Dawson, reminds me of what was it, Joe Goosen, there with that Corrales Castillo fight. you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you have that too, and like you said, you're blowing it, son. And
right,
those are those type of moments that stand out that say, hey, this trainer got their fighter to that point, that next level, to say separate you from like a challenger contender to a champion. And you
right.
bring up that part there with Joe Tessitore talking about you with Lawrence Claybay. That stands out, there as doing that work as a trainer.
Right, for sure, for sure. And it's like I said, I saved the voicemail and everything. That's been almost, let's say, I was 2005. So, we're talking 19 years. But it's still, it was enough, it was cool enough for me to save that voicemail for sure.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Now you have, like you said, you work there, with Beterbiev, alongside Marc Ramsay. Uh, how is like working with Marc Ramsay and that whole team there to kind of like get Beterbiev prepared and other fighters prepared for their fights here?
Right. It's the first time in my career, like my entire career, I've been the trainer. Like I handle everything. Nothing
Mm-hmm.
happens unless I say so. But
Mm-hmm.
Mark is a top trainer. He's trained some, numerous world champions, and he's
Mm-hmm.
got unbelievable prospects in the gym right now.
Yeah.
But he brought me in to help with Artur, like because I have the viewpoint of a guy who is a trainer but who also fought professionally before, and that's what they wanted or needed. And so Mark, like in the beginning, I didn't want to step on his toes. I didn't want to, you know, like act like I was taking over. I didn't know what to do. And he told me, he said, "Listen, I don't care about any of that." He goes, "I have no ego, nothing." He goes, "I just want what's best for the fighter. Tell him whatever you want. You don't have to ask me. You don't have to get clearance from me. You're a trainer. You're a good trainer. You tell him what you think you want to tell him." And it's been like that ever since. I just before a particular fight, I'll get a general idea of how we're going to approach the fight, but
Okay.
I base what I do off of that. So Mark gives me free reign, tells me I don't have to check with him, just do what I do and he'll do what he does, and together we can get this guy ready.
Yeah. It's something because one thing that is brought up at times when it comes to like teams is that you can have fighters that will have those, like I said, head trainers, chief second assistants, and things like that. And you'll see, like in between rounds, you'll have a fighter there on the stool, and you can hear like three different voices, pretty much around the same time. Where,
Listen. When Chad fought Andre Ward, and I get it, we were losing and everybody's panicking and stuff, but I talk, I speak, but it got to the point where we had, I was trying to tell Chad, what to do or whatever. Rafael Garcia's yelling like in, with a thick Spanish accent. And then there was another guy, I forget who the other guy was, and there was like three of us. And at one point, and I never saw the film, I never watched the fight on tape, but people have told me like, that was crazy. You could hear you. I yelled. I told everybody, shut up. Are you crazy? Shut up. Let me talk. And it reached that point where I just flipped out, and I've actually never seen that happened before, other than that fight with Chad.
Yeah, I mean, it's something because, like I said, if you get to the point where you're trying to get your fighter focused and get them to the proper adjustments, you want to be the one to give him those instructions and just have him have that in his mind before he goes out to the next round. If there's multiple voices going on around the same time, they might not be able to process it. This stuff is happening within, at least I would say, 50 seconds. Yeah, they say it's like a minute in between rounds. But depending on where that fighter is in the ring, you have to go from the end of that particular round, get to your corner, sit down on your stool, and then get, what needs to be done as far as like, face or anything,
Right.
cut, scratches. And then at the same time, listen to what your trainer or what your team is saying within those 50 or it could be 45 seconds before that whistle blows. And you have to get up to get yourself prepared for the next round.
Right. Well, what happens with Mark and I generally, he talks, it's his voice, but then with 10 seconds to go or so, I'll jump in and I'll pinpoint like one thing that I want to get across. Maybe two things, but definitely one that I'll tell Artur that I really think would benefit him for that fight or that round. So Mark talks, and then before Artur goes out, I give him my quick input, and then we go from there.
Yeah, gotcha. I mean, that's the thing is being able to properly like schedule, like if someone has something, they'll be able to drop it in, and another, trainer, another part of the team has something, they'll be able to drop it in. And that way, you know what, that fighter could process one thing at a time, one
Right.
thing at a time, one thing at a time, instead of it all coming in at once and that all sounds scrambled. Particularly like it could be something where it's at a point of adversity. Say, for example, a fighter that you're in the corner for gets knocked down. They get up and they have to get themselves back to the corner after that knockdown. That's something where that's a really big moment there for the team to where they say, hey, we got to get his mind right, get him collected, get him calmed down, and then be able to properly give him the adjustments that he needs in order to get back in the game in the next round.
Right, for sure. Yeah, yeah. That's your corner super important, and those are the moments. Like you could work a corner. I've worked with guys for 10 rounds, and
Mm-hmm.
Realistically, nothing dramatic happened. But then there comes a moment when they need you, and you got to step up and you got to say the right thing. You got to do what you have to do at that level. So yeah, I've seen that play out many times, and as a boxer, I was glad to have the right people with me, and as a trainer, I'm glad I was there.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Like I said, we're gonna go backwards here in what you've been doing in your career, and then after that, at the end, I'll flip it back to what's going on with Artur Beterbiev and the Dmitrii-Bivol. So you had the thing with the training, but also, like I said, you were there, from 1988 to 2001 as a world title contender there at the super middleweight and light heavyweight divisions there. Like, how was it to have that type of experience? Because, of course, you had the amateur career there being in the Northeast, or let's say the New England area, Connecticut area, had like high accolades there as an amateur. I think like, one of the like part of the all-time team around that era as well. So like go back to like, what you were doing there in your pro career first before we touch on the amateur career.
Right. Well, I was happy with my career. I think most fighters, I would assume, have regrets, about their careers, and I'm no different. I think it's funny. I always say this: when I was watching fights as a kid, watching the pros, back in the day. I don't know how old you are if you'd know this, but back in the day, on every weekend, there was fights, big fights on TV, free TV
Free
on
TV.
NBC,
Wide World of
CBS, and
Sports.
ABC. You know,
They would have
Marvin
that.
Hagler, Sugar Ray
Mhm,
Leonard, Tommy Hearns,
mhm,
Roberto Duran. I saw them all for free on Saturday and Sunday afternoons.
mhm.
The amazing thing is, subconsciously, when I watch these fights, I always assume that, if I'm watching, you know, Tyrone Crawley against Melvin Paul, I assume both of them came into the fight 100% prepared. Their training camp went great. They made weight. They sparred. They did everything. As a pro, I found out that's very rarely do you go into a fight where everything is great. You get cut in the gym, you get hurt in the gym, you're losing weight right up until the weigh-in. You're sick. You have a death in the family. You have girl problems. I mean, there's so many things that go into the play, and I had so many fights. It was kind of disappointing. Like I had fights where big fights. Like kids were watching me the same way I was watching the guys when I was a kid, and they're expecting my best, but they weren't always able to see that because I had so many things. Usually, it was weight loss, like weight. It just seemed like every fight, it was a new way to lose weight,
Mm.
and you have to. It's just miserable. Um, that's one thing I regret about my career. It was one thing I don't miss is making weight, trying to make weight for fights. That was a horrible part of the whole process for sure. But
Right.
I fought a lot of fights on TV. I think I was on TV like, you know, 12, 15 times, something like that. I fought on pay-per-view, I fought on ABC, I fought on ESPN, USA. Wait, hold on one second. She's
Yeah.
here. And so that was great. I mean, that was, it's an honor, and to do these things. I remember being on ESPN the first time, and I'm just saying, man, this is crazy. Like, it's just like all the guys I watched on ESPN. Now I'm on ESPN. Now people are watching me, and it
Yeah.
was like a dream. It was like a dream. It was almost surreal. It was almost like, until I got in the ring, it's almost like it wasn't even real, you know. Uh, but I enjoyed it. Other than making a weight, I didn't like that very much. But I fought some good guys. I beat some good guys. I lost to some good guys, but I was in there with them, and I was in the magazines. I was on the posters. My dreams pretty much all came true.
Yeah, like you said, that part there in the moment of fighting on ESPN is like a full circle moment. Like you said, watching fighters there on ABC, ESPN, and that type of stuff. The wide world of sports, I kind of missed that era because I was born in the '80s, pretty much in the early '80s, and that type of stuff. So I missed that era once it once it was at its peak.
Yeah,
After that, it kind of like transitioned over to the USA's and the HBOs and the ESPNs and that type of stuff. So I
right.
kind of missed that free TV portion of ABC Wide World of Sports with those big boxing moments. But like you were talking about, um, that's one of the toughest things there for fighters in a lot of cases is losing that weight, depending on when the fight is, when the next fight is, and you got all of these other factors that are coming in too as well to think about while you're preparing for a fight. And losing weight is like, as you said, it could be like very tough depending on when the fight is or how long you've been in the game. Because of course once you get older, it gets tougher to lose, to cut that weight depending on like how your diet is and things like that. So
That's
uh
it.
yeah, that's a real thing to kind of like watch out for.
Right.
What would you say is one fight in your professional career that you say was your the moment that like you would point to?
Uh, in terms of like my best showing type of
You could
thing.
be your best doing something like that.
Well, it's funny. Uh, when I think of fights that I think of fights like in these terms, like after the fight, how did I feel? In the days after the fight, how did people treat me? And I know I fought a guy named Alfonso Bailey on USA Tuesday Night Fights, and I looked really good. It was one of the best fights of my career. And I just remember after, everybody who saw me, it was like I was a champion. I wasn't world champion, but it was like I was a champion. Like I fought it was like a dream come true. I fought a very good fight on television. So that was against Alfonso Bailey, which on USA Tuesday Night Fights. It was actually Thursday Night Fights back then. That was great. Mike, believe it or not, my fight with Michael Nunn is probably the one that most people know me about, know me for, were probably most impressed with, and they talked to me about the most. And it's a fight I lost. I lost by decision, but because of who he was and everything, I get a lot of credit for that fight because it was a good fight. It was a close fight. A lot of people thought I won. They thought it was a draw. They thought he won, but it was, I pushed him. And considering the level of opposition, I think that was certainly one of the high moments of my career.
Yeah. You had that, like you said, with Michael Nunn. I think you brought up one other fight there. I think it was against Henry Maske there in
That's where I
Germany.
fought for the world title. Yes.
Yeah. That for the IBF light heavyweight title there too. There, and you talked about that moment as well, as far as like the fans there, greet you and treat you very well there at that particular point.
Yeah, when you it's different. Like when you go to Germany, it's different than coming here. Like if a guy from Germany came to Hartford to fight, right? Nobody would care. Like they would go to the fight, but if they saw him in the mall, they'd have no idea who he was. Like right. But when I went over there, they had my picture everywhere. I was in the newspaper every day. My name was on the car. The car that picked me up had me and Henry's name on it, right? And they had me at the mall signing autographs. And so when I went, it was in the newspaper, and they told me, they brought me right from the airport. This was actually when I fought Graziano Racigani in Germany. And so we're going to the mall, and I said, man, so what are we doing here? And they go, oh, you're going to go to a sporting goods store, and you're going to, you'll sign autographs for fans. And I'm like, oh, okay. So in my mind, I'm thinking it's like in America, like I'll be at the mall, I'll be in front of the store, and maybe people will walk by, and if they notice me, they'll, hey, you're a fighter, right? So I get there. It's a huge mall, it's a huge store. And I remember seeing this, like, it looked like a festival was going on, down the hallway a little bit. And I'm saying to myself, I said, man, when I'm done here, I want to go to that and check it out, right? So I asked the guy, I go, man, what's going on down there? And he goes, those people are for you. They're waiting for you. Like that's the line of people waiting to get your autograph. And I'm like, what? And I go, and the store was mobbed with people waiting for me to sign and they had these postcards made with my picture on it. It's kind of it turned out to be like a famous picture over there for a little while. It's a you could Google it, I'm sure. It's a picture of me I have an Iceman necklace. I still have it. And it's in my teeth, and I'm holding, so you can read Iceman.
Oh, okay.
And they had me signing these cards, and it was like a major thing, because they treat boxers differently over there than they do here, for sure.
Yeah. I was thinking here if I could try to pull something up here, but you said it was something where it was like on your teeth or something like that. I didn't know if it was something like this picture. If you could see this picture right here,
Yeah, no, it's not that one. It's like it's a I have like a medallion. You remember how Macho Camacho had a necklace and it said Macho? Well, mine says Iceman, and they had me put it in between my teeth. So I'm like this, and it's right here.
It's right in the middle.
And they made a postcard out of it, and it was in the program book and everything. And it's online somewhere. Like you'd have to know exactly how to find it, but it's on the internet somewhere. And it's pretty cool though. But yeah, they they make you feel like a fighter, and I noticed that. I noticed it in Europe. It's
Hmm.
different in England, in Germany, Australia, even, Paris, France, over there. They treat they you're a bigger star there than you would be here. Like Henry Maske in Germany was like Michael Jordan is here at that time in the
Mm.
'90s. Yeah, he
Yeah.
was big. Yeah,
That's definitely an experience to have a fight internationally, and hey, over there it's completely different when it comes to boxing than it is here in the States, particularly, at least for me, I would say from that part of, I would say, the mid '80s up until now, because there you kind of like had the boost in popularity of professional basketball and professional football, and I think they kind of like changed the landscape of boxing at that instance there, from an amateur level up to a professional level, because I feel like more of the young men kind of gravitated towards football and basketball, unless we're doing the boxing thing at that point.
right, right. I got you.
Yeah. Now, if there in your amateur career, said like you had like a bronze think bronze medal there in the Olympic trials, and also you were named as like one of the all the greatest folks out there in the amateurs around that area that you're in, the Connecticut, New England area. That also include like Mike Tyson and things like that too as well. So uh,
Right.
kind of going to that part as far as like being in the amateur career, because you mentioned it, of course, you're in Hartford, Connecticut. I've visited that city there a couple of times. It's a good city, good town, and everything like that. But it's not like of course, like New York or DC or
Right.
Boston or anything like that. You know.
Yeah, yeah. It's a smaller city. Uh, but good boxing history for sure. And as an amateur, I did everything I wanted to do pretty much. I when I first started amateur boxing, all I wanted to do was win the Golden Gloves, our local tournament,
Hmm.
Western New England tournament. I wanted to win the Golden Gloves. That was my only goal, and I did that four. I actually won it 4 times, 4 years in a row. Which was big. But then probably my biggest goal was to make it to the Olympic trials. Not even to make the Olympic team, but to make it to the Olympic trials. That to me was such a big thing, because when I was coming up as a kid watching boxing, the '84 Olympic trials were coming up. And we're talking Mark Breland and Frank Tate and Henry Tillman, so I really looked up to those guys, Dennis Milton and all them. And so they were all in the Olympic trials. So I wanted to be in the Olympic trials. I felt like that was the pinnacle. And I did that in 1988. And that was probably the biggest moment of my entire boxing career, was qualifying for the Olympic trials in 1988.
Yeah, and they, like you said, you had those teams, '84 and '88, and definitely had a number of standouts there. With that particular class there, and you were there to kind of like compete in those trials alongside a lot of those notable fighters out there. Now we're gonna like go right back into what's happening. Like I said, February 22nd. Looks like the rematch is happening. Beterbiev and Bivol. You have, what is it? One of these folks here on the live chat, he says that Beterbiev is going to put the pressure on even earlier in this fight, going to cut Bivol off and break him down, because he says Bivol likes to throw the hook a lot. So Beterbiev should switch to a elbow block off the left hook to punish his forearms there. So I guess he has like a little bit of a strategy for Beterbiev here in this upcoming rematch. I mean, I
Right.
don't know, how Bivol is going to approach this particular fight, because I think it was like one question that was raised up here. Oh, I know what it was. This came from our guy there, Joseph Herod. He asked, "Is there anything that Dmitrii Bivol could do better than the first fight?" That's what he brought up.
You know, I think this much. I think Artur can adjust. He has areas he could adjust to do better.
Mm,
I don't think Bivol has many areas where he could adjust to do better because he can't move more. If he moves more, it's going to look like he doesn't want to win. It's going to look like he doesn't really want to fight. He's got to engage, but he can't engage more because he's not going to take Artur's punches. Like he knows that, and that's I mean, it's not rocket science. He was moving as much as he was because the punches hurt. I mean, let's be completely real here. Like that's why
that's
you
what I
move.
was saying after that first round. He tried it, and
right. When you move more in the last 4 than you do at any point in the fight, that means you're trying to get through this without getting hurt. And I'm not blaming him. I'm just pointing out the obvious. So Artur could put more pressure on. I don't think Dmitrii would respond well to it. I think our adjustments are going to be better than his. I would say that.
Gotcha. Now, also, this kind of came from, I think it was like Twitter. If I could look it up here, if I could get who actually asked this question. Oh yeah, it's someone from Twitter. There, I think it's named under Beat the Press. This stems from an event that happened here a couple of weeks ago. Of course, you had this thing here with the Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson and all that, and they had the thing where Jake Paul wins by decision or whatever it is. And apparently, it had like a tweet out there, I guess, that came from Artur Beterbiev that says that he would have been interested in having a fight with Jake Paul. Like, what do you make of Beterbiev saying that he would like to fight Jake Paul? Coming off of the fight between Paul and Mike Tyson.
I mean, honestly, I don't. From what I know, Artur's really not like an internet guy, right? I think he has a guy who runs his account for him, right? I don't think that was actually Artur typing out on his typewriter, on his computer. I don't think that was him. If I know Artur, I don't think he watched the fight. I don't think he's ever seen Jake Paul fight. I don't think he would know Jake Paul. If he saw Jake Paul in the mall, I don't think he would know that was him. He's not really a boxing fan like that. You have your team behind you that handles these type of things, and you put his name in the mix and all that. I don't think Jake Paul in a million years would fight Artur. and he would be a fool because he would get killed if he fought Artur. If he got down in weight and fought Artur, in a real fight, he's getting annihilated. Like there's no question.
And I don't think there would be any state or country or anything that would sanction that fight to begin with.
Right. It'd be stupid.
But when you said that that could be somebody else's account, that was exactly what I thought when I saw that post. I'm like, nah, man, that's gotta be somebody else.
Because Artur doesn't talk like that. Like he said something like, so what are we going to do here? Like it's almost like a street thing, and that's not him. He doesn't talk like that. So I don't think it was him. Maybe one of the guys on his team, just getting things going. But, there's no, I don't think Turkey, Al Sheikh there, in Saudi, I don't think he'd be interested in that. But who knows? But yeah, I don't think Artur's thinking about Jake Paul at all.
Gotcha. All right, a couple of questions here on the live chat. Brother Seth Brown here, shout out to you, says, how'd you get involved with Marc Ramsay and Artur Beterbiev? Obviously, you guys trained in Canada, not too far from, of course, Connecticut and things like that. So you could go into that.
Well, what happened was, I've been going to Canada for like 35 years. I fought there a few times as an amateur and a pro. And I used to go to Montreal all the time to spar with Otis Grant when he had fights coming up. And I sparred with a bunch of guys. And I actually sparred with Jean Pascal when he was training with Marc Ramsay. We sparred at Russ Amber's gym. So I knew Marc for a long, long time. And when the time came, apparently Artur wanted someone on the team who had professional experience at a certain level, because Marc is a great trainer, but he didn't have pro fights or even many amateur fights. So, some fighters, they want they want to relate somebody that can relate to him in a way that only a fighter could relate to them. And Mark knew me, and Russ Amber really knew me well. And Russ, told Mark, yeah, I think, you should try John first. So I went up there in 2016 to in the beginning of the year just to hold pads for Artur and see how things worked. And like from the first day, everything clicked. And, I guess, he could see I knew what I was talking about. And I actually showed him a few things that he used and that I heard him tell someone that I showed it to him. I showed him the move. And he actually stopped the guy in the gym with the move that I showed him.
Oh, okay.
So, it was kind of like, all right, what he showed me worked. And I've been on the team ever since.
Gotcha. Because I was going to bring up one moment there with Marc Ramsay, at least that stood out to me as far as like him as a trainer, because this was like over in Atlantic City, the Hard Rock Hotel, the casino in Atlantic City, when Eleider Alvarez ended up stopping Sergey Kovalev there for those light heavyweight titles. Yeah, I was there live for that, and that was like a crazy moment there at that time, because I mean you had actually Beterbiev-Bivol there on that same card, I think there against Isaac Chilemba, and then you had that as the main event there too. But that was one of those moments there with Marc Ramsay that kind of like stood out, at least for me there while watching it live.
Yeah.
You got what was it, Nicholas Machete here says is here the boxer that described boxing or training with Beterbiev. He said he felt like he fell from an airplane, as far as like if he getting hit by Beterbiev or something like that.
No. That was Lonnie B. Lonnie B
Okay.
said when he got hit the first time by Artur, he said it was like when you're on an airplane and the plane takes off and the centrifugal force like pushes your whole body back up against the seat. He said that's what it felt like. It felt like his whole body just kind of involuntarily stiffened up and went back. And yeah, Lonnie, if you ever want to know what it's like to box with Artur, you ask Lonnie, because Lonnie used to tell me, he said, man, he said, I'll never fight Artur. He said, if they ever call you and tell you I want to fight him and the fight is, proposed, he said, they're lying. He said, I would never fight Artur. I'm a good fighter. I know I'm good, but I will never fight Artur Beterbiev. Never.
Yeah. And that's something there where, yeah, Steph, that was around that like 2017, that Eleider Alvarez Sergey Kovalev fight. It was around that time period. And the thing with Beterbiev is, as he was building up there, like I said, up to the point of the first fight against Dmitrii, 20 wins, 20 knockouts. That was like one of the most impressive things there, having a 100% knockout ratio and being at the time a unified champion there at that particular point. So we're just looking forward to this particular rematch there in the light heavyweight division, and at least for me, this kind of like it's going to be 3 weeks after we have another key bout in the light heavyweight division with David Benavidez and David Morrell Jr. They just getting up there to the light heavyweight, and they have a version of a WBC title and the WBA.
So stupid. It's a WBA
regular.
It's an embarrassment.
Like, interim.
That title is worth nothing, and I have respect for both of those guys. Those guys are good fighters. Nothing to do with them personally, but that title is garbage. It is worthless. It's an embarrassment that one of those guys is going to be walking around telling people they're the WBA interim champion. How can you be an interim champion when the real champion is active and fighting? It makes no sense. It doesn't. It's such garbage. And that's, I go off on it, man. I hate boxing when it comes to that type of stuff. And I will never call one of those guys light heavyweight champion unless they beat Artur. Never.
Yeah, and that's the thing about it. It's like you got interim champions, you got franchise champions, you got world champions.
Nobody on earth,
North American champions, all that type.
There's not a kid on earth right now who's telling his friends, Yeah, man. One day I hope when I grow up, I could be the WBC interim champion. Nobody in the world wants that championship. Nobody.
Yeah.
Period.
So I mean that's the only thing. It's just all that in name alone.
Right.
There. All right. One thing here before we kind of close down. Another thing when it comes to you and well at least through social media channels is you're like one of the great historians when it comes to boxing, and you bring up a lot of things that come up there when it comes to the sport. Kind of go into that and how much or how important it is to bring up those moments there in boxing.
Well, when I was a kid, the first book I really read about boxing was actually the 1952 ring record book. My father had it, and I just read the book, and I knew all the records, and I studied the records, and so I know the history, and it's important for people to understand the history. Like there's people who think Floyd Mayweather is the greatest fighter of all time, and that's okay, right? If you think he is, he is. But if you don't know who Roberto Duran is, then you can't tell me Floyd's the best ever when you don't even know. And all you know about Duran is that he lost to Vinny Pazienza in 1994. I mean, come on, man. I'm talking about Duran in 1977.
Ever.
What I mean? It's just craziness. They don't know Kid Gavilan. They don't know Sugar Ray Robinson. They don't know anything. And I had a guy. I told a guy one time. I said Tommy Hearns at 147 would easily beat Floyd Mayweather. Easily. And he told me, yeah, I'm not talking about ancient guys like that. And I'm like, ancient? We're talking about Tommy Hearns. Tommy Hearns was not fighting in 1932. He was fighting in the 80s and the 90s. So there's people out here, boxing fans, who their history, when they say the greatest of all time, they're really talking about the greatest of the last 15 years. When they started watching boxing, they don't know anything about the history. They don't understand how great Sugar Ray Leonard was. They have no idea what it took for Ray Leonard to beat Tommy Hearns that first time. They have no idea, and they should. You have to know. You have to understand who these guys are and what they did, and compared to the era now, because the era now, you're not gonna. There's nobody on earth that's gonna tell me these guys are better today than Alexis Arguello was. Like that's
Or
it.
even
That's
Aaron Pryor. I was going to bring
it,
up Aaron Pryor.
right. It's an embarrassing. It's a joke if you tell me Tank Davis is beating Alexis Arguello at 135. I mean, I can't even take you seriously if we're going to discuss this. Like it's just crazy. Uh, People have no idea who these guys are, and I tell people, I said, you know who Floyd Mayweather is? Yep. You know who Muhammad Ali is? Yep. You know who Manny Pacquiao is? Yep. You know who Tank Davis is? Yep. I said Archie Moore had more knockouts than all four of those guys had
It's
fights
combined.
combined. You
Combined.
take all their fights combined,
Mm-hmm.
Archie Moore knocked out more people than those four guys had fights. That's who Archie Moore was. And they look at me like I'm speaking a foreign language. They have no idea who I'm talking about. You get a guy with 30 knockouts and they talk about what a killer he is. Like Archie Moore had like 148 knockouts.
Yeah.
I
But
mean,
like
come on, man.
Sugar Ray Robinson and all the fights that he had, but
Right.
that that
It's like
that kind of like goes to
here's the equation I use.
okay.
People say LeBron James is the greatest basketball player. I said, okay, he might be. I said, but if you don't even know, not that you don't know about Bill Russell, but you never even heard of Bill
Of
Russell.
Bill Russell.
You don't know the name. How can you say the man is the greatest of all time when you don't even know what all time means? You have no idea. Like you literally just disintegrated and dismissed 70 years of basketball because you don't know about it. And you think because those guys were in an earlier era with black and white TV that they can't be unbelievably phenomenally awesome. That's where we're at in this era,
Yeah.
and it's an embarrassment to talk to people.
Look where you talk about the thing there with basketball, and you bring up Bill Russell. I mean, I talk about a George Mikan, a Bill Russell, a Wilt Chamberlain, Moses Malone, a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar,
Dr. J,
Dr. J, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Kevin McHale. Like, I mean, at least I could do that. And I was born in the 80s. So if I know about the history of basketball, I could, recall the thing there with Sugar Ray Robinson, with Benny Paret, with, like I said, Alexis
Hey,
Arguello.
listen, let me just say one thing. I just want to say one thing because I don't want to be just. My phone is really low, so no, I'm saying so. If we get cut off, I don't want you to think I hung up on you. Like, it just means my battery died.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. So I bring up all of those guys because it's like, for me, at least for boxing, I had it where you had ESPN Classic, right?
Right.
When that was out there, in the 90s, early 2000s, I would watch like all of those old fights. So I would know about these guys. Right. So to compare like this particular era to those guys is it's like,
well, here's my ultimate thing. And I want your fans to understand this, that they're listening. If you say someone is the greatest of all time, that means you know what all time means. You know who was there. How can you say a guy's the greatest of all time when you don't know people from 50 years ago, from 40 years ago? It makes no sense. Like, you're not qualified if you don't know who these people are. It makes no sense that you could even judge. It's crazy. Like, people talk about Floyd, and Floyd's a great fighter. Don't get me wrong. Floyd's awesome. He's unbelievable. He's a phenomenon. But talk about the shoulder roll like he invented it. Archie Moore was doing the shoulder roll 30 years before Floyd was even thought of being born. I mean, come on, man. Ezra Charles, Jersey Joe Walcott. I mean, these guys, Charlie Burley and even Georgie Benton and Hurricane Carter, they weren't even world champions. These guys did the shoulder roll. They did all that unbelievable, phenomenal stuff. Floyd didn't invent that. I mean, come on. It's, you got to know what you're talking about. If I'm going to talk about music history, I have to know history. How can I talk about music history and I don't know anybody other than Michael Jackson? It's crazy.
Right. But you know what, though? Listen, I didn't invent the shoulder roll. But you know what? I made it look good. See, I was able to, move around and everything like that. You saw what I did against Manny Pacquiao. You saw what I did against, Guerrero. You saw what I did.
You got the hand gestures and everything.
You saw what I did against Andre Berto, against Canelo Alvarez. I just made it look good. And because of that's why I'm TBE. No, I'm just playing around. So, but yeah, you like you said, you can't talk about someone being the greatest of all time if you don't know about fighters that were there 30, 40, 50 years ago.
It makes no sense. You're not qualified to do so.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. All right, there. So very, very, very thankful for you to get on here and take the time to just speak with me here at the Boxing Source. And we're gonna have more conversations here coming up, because I know you had that preparation there with Artur Beterbiev and him having that next trip over to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia for that rematch against Beterbiev-Bivol. So we're gonna definitely keep in touch with you, and y'all gotta follow him on social media. He's there, Iceman John Scully. You could look him up on Facebook. You could look him up on Instagram. You could look him up on Twitter. I think he's on Twitter as well. So y'all be able to follow Iceman John Scully here in everything that he's doing here up to this particular point.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no doubt. So I will check y'all later on. And once again, thanks to Iceman John Scully for joining us here at the Boxing Source. And I will catch y'all later. Peace out.
All right.